Welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist as well as an astrologer. And my guest today is Peter Mark Adams. Welcome, Peter.
Hi there, Anna. Lovely. Thank you for inviting me on.
So I really love this book of yours, which I'm reading. It's called The Power of the Healing Field. And it looks
Can
like
flash the cover.
yeah. I don't always have the books. Sometimes they come in PDF form, so I'm extra happy when I'm actually holding one in my hands.
Oh yeah, it's always better. Always.
So I'm really, for so many reasons, I am enjoying your book hugely. But I guess a good place to begin would be for you to talk a little bit about what the healing field actually is.
Oh wow, that's diving in, huh? What is clear? I mean, for the past 20 odd years, my partner Kenzie and I have been we've run a healing practice, energy healing, energy psychology, and related modalities. Basically, I'm professional rebirther, rebirthing breath work, and vivation professional, that's to say, is more meditative, whereas Kenzie is more on the side of energy psychology, that's EFT, and her own technique, mind connection healing. So putting these things together, what has emerged for us very strongly over the course of these years is that the nexus, the healing nexus, is often buried in, on the one hand, memories that are lost, on the other hand, in terms of perinatal experiences, that's to say, experiences undergone in and around the birth process and in the womb. And beyond that, in a number of cases, we have what we would identify as past life trauma. So it's normally traumatic deaths in previous lives, if I can put it that way. And that, you know, they come through very strongly. And even beyond that, what I can only describe as ancestral or familial and ancestral trauma. So the problem with all of this evidence, of course, is it doesn't fit in with the prevailing biomedical model, does it? So,
oh yeah,
you know, if we just look at the evidence that energy healers deal with each and every day, you quickly realize that consciousness, wherever it's located, has distinctive feel-like features, and that it seems to be of a atemporal, non-local nature. And what I mean by that is that the traumatic events or disturbances within this field that influence our day-to-day lives appear to have characteristics that defy time and defy distance. So that, you know, like what I mean is when we intervene in the field to affect healing, we can do it at a distance. So that's a non-local effect. And we can do it atemporally. That's to say, you can heal things in the past that affect then the present. So it's all connected. That's the healing field.
Well, it makes complete sense that we're talking about something that's outside of time, because irrespective of what can be scientifically proven, our experience is that memories that we hold, which have tremendous emotional impact, still affect us. And sometimes we're conscious of those memories, we remember them, and sometimes we're not. And so in your work, in my work, we encounter the stuff that very often has been consciously forgotten, but stays there. And the amount of times that I hear clients say, oh, that was so long ago, how come it still bothers me so much? And, you know, it's understanding that we're talking about feeling, and that feeling is energy in itself, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I mean, emotional disturbance is a pattern of energy, or maybe we could say a disrupted pattern of energy within the field. Yes, I totally agree with that.
So What was your own path to discovering this world?
The energy world. Well, I've always been a little bit psychic, but leaving that aside, for me, it started in my teens doing the martial arts, and they included karate as well as Tai Chi. So the alternative energy body, so to speak, is kind of intrinsic to those disciplines. And, you know, not a lot of people think about it, but, you know, in a sense, those martial arts at a certain level are the obverse side of acupuncture. Okay, because we're working on or with the same energy body. And in order to be able to do those martial arts effectively, you need to cultivate key energy. You know, it's kind of central practice. So, you know, you just can't avoid it at that age. You know, throughout my teens, I trained on the martial arts and I always had a huge interest in them. And then there's kind of a long period, and then I was kind of brought back to the whole thing by encountering Reiki. And that gave me another perspective or dimension of understanding the healing field in terms of the, if we say the healing field is panpsychism writ large, okay, it's, you know, it's distributed consciousness in everything, then animism is the recognition that there are centers of conscious awareness distributed throughout this field, and not all of them are visible to us. And I think with Reiki, you get an immediate relationship to what I can only describe as higher order entities or beings. Okay, because it's an autonomous flow of energy. It's not your key energy that you're using with Reiki. It comes through you and it's spiritually guided. It's kind of a no-brainer, in fact. You know, you're not there to diagnose, to, you know, do specific stuff, to try and mentally direct the energy. It's the opposite. It's more effective when you let go. So obviously there's agency at work in these processes that most of us have. I mean, I did my degree in formal philosophy. I mean, this stuff is difficult for me to acknowledge and accept. So, but nevertheless, force of evidence of doing this work for 20 odd years simply confronts you with the fact there's lots of stuff we just don't understand. And there are a lot of benevolent forces at work that we can cooperate with.
Okay, so can you tell us more about benevolent forces?
Well, it's very difficult to describe. The manifestation of benevolent forces, I say Reiki is one form. And I'm keeping this within a kind of healing context, right? Because otherwise it'll spill out into all kinds of esotericism and occult stuff, which we're not principally dealing with. What we seem to have encountered is that there are higher order beings and that they have a distinct role to play in the evolutionary unfolding of humanity as well, I'm sure, as a vast number of other responsibilities. And so the two kind of poles on this circuit, the upper level is evidenced in, for instance, the higher yoga tantra, you know, the Indo-Tibetan. So those initiations give you a direct initiation into the energy and spirit of a very much higher order being. And we're talking about an order of initiation so that, you know, 500,000 people in a meeting will all, or can all receive this blessing in one go. You know, so we're talking about order of power and effectiveness, which is quite beyond our ability to imagine. And then down at the very personal level, hands-on healing, you know, that sense you often get during the healing process that you're accompanied and assisted. And for those who are dedicated to the healing path, we often find that you're protected in a way. You have that feeling that, you know, you may not be overflowing with wealth and this and that, but there's a kind of solid support that you get because you have made a conscious decision to enroll yourself in a certain evolutionary and spiritually growing current. Okay, and that current brings a number of helping beings and entities with it. I know, I hope that makes sense.
It does. Now, there's a number of things here. So just to clarify for viewers, what you mean is that in the case of Reiki and energy healing, what's happening is energy is being transferred through, so that you're a vessel for energy, a conduit perhaps, for energy that's
Reiki,
coming
yes.
from an external source.
Yes.
And it's passing through you. And you've also used the word higher beings, which implies that there are lower beings. And I think perhaps a little bit of explanation might be good here.
Okay, so again, in the practice of energy healing, when people die, they often don't realize that, for instance, they have died. Okay, and therefore they're in a kind of in-between state, not knowing. And in that state, they can attach themselves to people's energy bodies who are in a vulnerable state, maybe because they're having an operation or something. And that is one form of energy healing, is to release those forms. Those, in acupuncture, they're called gui. It's like the empty shell of someone who's passed on, so that it can become troublesome, and therefore you release it to the light. Your part is to recognize and release that, and then, from what I'm told, I haven't seen this myself, but higher order beings then take control of those people who are passing, to allow them to move on to another state. Okay, so you know, that's one base level, and then you can have high degrees of animation in this process. That's to say, agency, which is of a parasitic nature. Okay, so you know, I merely describe them as parasites because there's a huge vocabulary around this, which is a little overwrought. Demonic forces, and then that brings you, you know, is it the devil? And then, you know, is it, you're into all kinds of complication, and it's unnecessary, you know. So there's various degrees of parasitism around, and generally a person needs to be very run down emotionally and very vulnerable to allow an entity to attach itself to their energy body, and then kind of consume their energy even further. So this is like the takes us into the area of possession, and this is a very rare phenomenon, I have to say, in energy healing. It does occur, but it's pretty rare. You know, and the different levels of possession need to be recognized. You know, there's like infestation, and then, you know, there's oppression, and then goes on to a kind of person becomes addicted to that. And then fourth stage is full possession, which is incredibly rare and incredibly dangerous. It's not something that you should attempt to deal with generally, I would say. But recognizing early stages is important because it can be a sign that somebody's energy body is emotionally disturbed, and therefore makes an opening for things to happen. So I say the infestation is often a run of bad luck, things broken at home, small accidents, and that might escalate to where they have cuts or bruises when they wake up in the morning, and then that escalates further, you know. So as energy healing, is to recognize the symptoms, so to speak, and by stepping in early, you know, if somebody comes to you, if you can heal the underlying emotional issue, the energy body will seal itself.
Okay.
No, yeah.
So this is, you know, the very thing that people fear could happen and makes them want to stay away from all this nebulous stuff. And yet, as you know and I know, if your intention is one of healing, and it's in a love intention,
yeah,
then as you said, there's a protection there.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, and if you're practicing disciplines like Reiki or any spiritual discipline, there's normally a whole cohort of higher beings in connection with those traditions. So, you know, and I say, once you step into the role of healer, you gain an enormous amount of support just from that fact.
And it is, again, the intention, because it's also about where you are focusing. If you're focusing on the light, that is where you go. It's the light.
Instead of sticking your hand in the sewer, so to speak. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or then, yes, you are going to attract all sorts of unpleasant nastiness.
Absolutely.
Whereas you are intending to look at the light and move in the light, that is exactly where you will be, and you will be safe. So tell us about your first experience of Reiki then.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, I was taken along to meet a Reiki teacher, and I didn't know anything about it at that point. But she had enormous energy, not just because of Reiki, but she was kind of somebody blessed with a very high Kundalini energy. And I was sitting there talking with her, and all of a sudden I noticed like these blobs of green manifesting in my visual field. I was like, what? I was like rubbing my eyes. I was looking out the window. There's nothing there. There's nothing wrong. I looked at her again, and these blobs were getting bigger and bigger. And then they were like covering her body. And then it looked like oil paint running over the surface of her body, and a green, wonderful emerald green interlaced with this kind of radiant sapphire blue. And I realized at that point that her energy was so intense, it had awakened my ability to see the aura. Okay, so, you know, that was, and also I think there's another thing here, that when you bring a system like that on such high energy to somebody, the entities and beings, the healing entities and beings assist in the process to move it forward. Okay, so that recognition that there is agency going on in a very good way, a very positive way. So that really introduced me to Reiki big time. And you may have noticed in the book, actually, there's a series of 4 photographs. And I don't know if you allow me to share, but I can show those photographs if you wish right now.
Yes, of course. Yes, indeed. And I believe you can share.
Okay, let me just put this up, and let's see if this happens.
Yeah.
I couldn't get full screen mode anyway. Okay, I'm just confused myself. Let me just reset that, and 1 second, please. Sorry about that.
I'm just flipping through. If you knew what pages in the book you're referring to.
Okay. Well, I have it here now.
Okay, good.
Share screen. So these are the photographs. And let me just tell you what was happening. This was a graduation group from our Reiki training. And so I was going to take a photograph of them. So I picked my little tiny, you know, this was like 2000 or 2001. I picked my little plastic digital camera up, and I turned the flash on, pointed it at them, and took this photograph. And immediately it was as though I had stood in front of a mirror and attempted to take a flash photograph, because the light just came back into my eyes through the viewer. Exactly like as though the flash had hit a surface and was reflected back at me. So, I took another photograph and it still was happening. I took a third, and then finally the fourth one was clear. And we didn't understand what had happened. These were taken within about 2 seconds of each other, And as you can clearly see there, that's Kenzie on the left. She was actually drawing the Reiki symbol and invoking the energy. And lo and behold,
Wow.
there it was.
Yeah.
It was so dense in that field. As you see, it's kind of colored, the whole background orange. And then in the subsequent ones, the orange slowly diminishes and finally. So the energy, I believe, chose to manifest itself in a very powerful way.
It's interesting because it seems that since the advent of digital photography, people are capturing things that hadn't been captured before. Orbs, from instance, and in your case, the energy. So that's wonderful to be able to do that from time to time, to see, just to actually capture that on camera.
I mean, I don't know if it's reproducible again. I did feel that there was a sense of agency there, and that it chose to manifest. And since we're talking about this issue of agency and manifestation, let me just mention one other case. I was again just taken along to see, I forget his name. He does this beautiful spiritual singing. He has like so many octaves. Tom Kenyon, his name. And I was in the amphitheater there. He was on the stage. He was talking, and then he starts singing. And he works with these higher order beings called Hathors. I had no idea what was going on. And then at some point, quite distinctly, I saw these tall columns of light manifest around him on the apron of the stage. And when I say tall, they were like, I don't know, 5-6 meters tall, white light columns. And then slowly they drifted off the apron and up through the audience and just disappeared. And it was only at the end of this performance, or whatever you'd want to call it, I don't know, seance or what. Somebody in the audience asked him, these Hathors, what do they look like? And he said, oh yeah, when they manifest, it's as tall white columns of light. So, again, the agency for me to see that, it was like the agency for me to see the first Reiki teacher's energy field in such clarity. The agency behind the Reiki energy manifesting itself to a simple, crude digital camera. And again, the agency involved in allowing me to see the Hathors, these higher order beings. So, at some point you have to hold up your skeptical arguments and say, okay, I surrender.
Indeed. It's, I think ultimately, people ask, well, how do we do this? Well, you have to you have to learn to begin by trusting yourself, and trusting what you think is your imagination might not just be your imagination. So this is, I think, the biggest pitfall, or the biggest conundrum, if you like, when we're developing our, let's call it, spiritual sense, is that it's hard to know whether we're imagining things or whether there's an external connection, because it's happening in our heads, and it's very easy to dismiss. Now, I have my own thoughts on being able to tell the difference, but let's hear how would you say we can tell the difference?
Okay, I mean, for me, all the phenomena are secondary to the healing process itself. And that's the focus, the service. Okay, so it's not as though we're like chasing phenomena. we're not. It's not oh, there was a cat. It's not as though we're, for instance, ghost hunting, this kind of thing. These kind of processes are directed to kind of satisfying our curiosity, you know, or seeking proof of another world. And all of this kind of approach will generally leave you no better off. Okay, but when you focus on the healing process itself and you have subsidiary phenomena as a result of that, it's still the healing process that is the center of interest, the service you give and the result you get. You know, without the healing being achieved, everything else is, frankly, less than secondary. Okay, so the context is important. That's what I'm saying. And when the context shifts from just idle curiosity to service, there's a fundamental shift in the way we value and understand what's happening. Okay, so it gives it context.
Indeed, and it's service and also engagement, you know, when you're engaged. And I would say that when you begin this process of engagement, you find that you are supported and that you're given little signposts, I would say, to encourage you to know that this is not your imagination, that it is real. And so synchronous events begin to happen. And, you know, if you're getting information and you're thinking, oh, I wonder, and then later on in the day, that is mirrored again by something else.
Yeah.
You kind of go, oh, all right. Perhaps there's more to this. And then that gives you the confidence to trust more. And the more you trust, the more happens. And then more synchronous events happen. And it's like the energy just builds, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree with that. And also I'd add that some of the cases in the book seem to acknowledge that people who've passed on can intervene in the healing process itself. So whether that is the source of the kind of healing nexus, the key thing the person cannot remember or recall, but which is nevertheless central to their healing experience, okay, arises within the field of consciousness between the healer and the person you're working with. Okay, so once we go with this more feel-like understanding of consciousness, when two people come together for a healing encounter, there's a field generated between them, which has these non-local atemporal properties to it. And that gives the person who's trying to interpret the phenomena depth into the historical background of the problem, right? And within that nexus, deceased relatives may intervene to provide information.
I can tell you from my experience where I have a client in hypnosis, which is a kind of trance, and I am doing a guided meditation, shall we say, that takes them into a certain level. And my intention is to reinforce work we've already done in a very positive way, to invite healing. And so it's meant to be purely using the imagination. I can tell you there are times when it goes beyond imagination.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are encounters with loved ones who have passed. And I know it at that moment, and my client knows it. And then, of course, there are times when I'm saying something, I'm describing something I'm seeing, and they're already there before I've said it. There's clearly a link between myself and my client. And so it's beautiful and it's magical when it happens.
Can I just share a quote with you on this?
Yes.
This is Joan Costiona. I believe she's a psychotherapist and works in a Native American role in terms of her healing practice. And she wrote this beautiful sentence. She says, spirit work is based on the emergence of an intersubjective space where individual differences are melded in one field of feeling and experience shared by healer and sufferer. I thought it beautifully encapsulates what we're talking about at the moment. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. It's, you know, when you are in that healing frame, perhaps a good way to put it, whichever modality you're using, and you are fully engaged with the person that you're working with and they with you, there's the potential for change is quite extraordinary. And it's one of the things that I love about your book is reading, you know, different experiences that people have had. And it makes me think of some of my own experiences. And it's just, I think the very reason why I would recommend that people look at your book and read it is because if you're curious about this kind of thing, and you're not entirely sure what you think of it, it's really great to be reading other people's experiences and to open yourself to the possibility of learning more and hopefully experiencing more too.
Yeah, I mean, I say I try to put as wide a range of experiences in there using different modalities, so that in essence you can, you know, see the field of energy healing, you know, laid out, and also some of the fantastic results that arise through it, and connect that with our larger spiritual lives, because it's actually a continuum. It doesn't exist in a limited, you know, space. You know, it's infinite.
It is infinite. And it is at the core of who we are.
Yeah.
And when we discover this about ourselves, then suddenly anything and everything seems possible. And we discover who we truly are. And that creates a sense of peace.
Yes.
And it creates a sense of acceptance of ourselves, others, life. It just makes things easier.
It certainly does. I mean, the main thing for me is that it shows the far larger horizon of our higher selfhood, you know, outside of the limits of the persona. You know, when you're kind of locked into the persona's point of view, you're very vulnerable to all kinds of stuff going on around you. When you realize that persona is just one small part of a much larger, more complex and dynamic spiritual evolutionary process, you know, you're embedded within that, you're participating, and you're creating the future quite literally through your healing activity. And, you know, I always wonder if the fact that, you know, this field is atemporal, the more healing we do on the past, we change the dynamics of the future. The way the future is going to open out is proportionate to the amount of healing we can affect on the traumas of the past. Okay, so that it doesn't replicate.
Absolutely. And so that brings us to the ancestral side of things. Tell us a little bit about your experience in dealing with ancestral trauma.
Okay, my introduction to it happened in the context of family constellation therapy. Okay, and again, that was incredibly illuminating, you know, because I went along, I didn't know what it involved. And I can just briefly say what's involved, actually. I went into this large room, and there's a group of people there, most of whom were strangers to each other. There was a therapist who we knew, and there were 2 or 3 people who wanted the therapy that day, okay? And the extraordinary thing is that the first person steps forward who wants the therapy, and they choose people from the anonymous group of strangers to represent key members of their family dynamic. Father, mother, brother, sister, distant aunts, uncles, even people who've long passed can be represented, and they put them in the middle of the floor in relationship to each other that is suggestive of the dynamics of that family unit as they understand it. And then the extraordinary thing is they sit down. They don't partake in the therapy at that point at all. And from my personal experience, I can say once you're chosen and put into this system, this family system, while you remain fully aware of your own thoughts, feelings, and sensations, you become aware of an emotional overlay, which is somebody's thoughts, feelings, and sensations that you have no idea who they are. And it's those thoughts, feelings, and sensations the therapist comes and asks about. And by interrogating those overlays, those emotional overlays, they get a sense of the dynamic of this family group and where the nexus of the problem exists. And normally it's in an ethical failure at some point, either in the current lifetime or in the distant ancestral time. There's been so the field itself, I say, is an ethical field. It's not just some buzzing energy thing. It is it is an ethically generated and ethically generating field. The disturbances within the field arise from ethical violations. And when the therapist can correct those ethical violations, the field reharmonizes itself. Okay. And this is incredibly important because it means we can look at the community of the planet as an ethical field and recognize that it is highly traumatized in certain historical periods and certain parts. And we can reach into that field, reconstruct and recover that trauma, and then reharmonize it. And when we do so, the planetary harmony is increased. So for me, that's a clear spiritually evolutionary practice that any of us could be engaged in. You know?
Absolutely. And I think we cannot overestimate the importance of doing this work, because you can see how an event in generations back has a ripple effect for generations after. And certainly working with people of different cultures, I'm very conscious of cultural traumas that have happened historically. And that puts everything into a context for the individual, is recognizing that the family trauma is operating within the context of a cultural trauma. And even at that point already, things begin to unwind and unravel. And then when we start looking at it from an ancestral perspective, it's again, as you put it, it's creating like a harmony that was missing, which stretches also into the future. So I think it's very easy for in a culture like ours that is very focused, understandably, towards the individual, and very right and properly so, we tend to lose the downside is we lose sight of the extent to which we are also connected.
Community.
To family, connected to friends, connected to neighbors, connected to community, country, and so on. So we are all connected. We are indeed individuals, but we are part of something much, much bigger. And so by unraveling our own line, we are having an impact on many others.
Absolutely.
So it's a very beautiful way of doing things. I mean, we can see how the trauma affects much more than the individual.
Yes.
So clearly the healing is going to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So immediately connects this healing work with the wider spiritual evolution, you know, so that although, you know, we feel that we're quite small in terms of our impacts on the global situation, there's millions of us doing this work, you know, and it's that kind of ant-like activity that's trying to repair the fabric of the emotional and spiritual life of the planet. That's how I see it.
So for those who would like to learn more, what could they do?
Okay, well, the book is there. I mean, I wrote the book precisely to spread the message, so to speak, show a whole range of energy psychology and energy healing modalities at work, show the kinds of cases that come up and how they get resolved and how positive the results are. I mean, the people, you will have experienced that, you know, after the healing, their lives change. Fundamentally, all kinds of things that were problematic previously, relationship with money, power, well, all of these things are radically changed when healing takes place. So it reconfigures your reality. I wanted to get that across and show that it's attainable. There's lots of techniques we could talk about, the applicability of different techniques for different people, because of course they have a huge range of intensities involved with them, you know. So and finally, I wanted to situate all of this within this broader spiritual perspective of the healing of the planet, the global system, so to speak, which is our ultimate goal. Okay, so all of that is in the book.
It is, and I think I just want to stress again the fact that you heal one person, you heal the planet.
Yeah.
There is nothing more beautiful than that thought. So the steps that you take to heal yourself are going to have a positive impact on healing the planet.
Absolutely.
Because those positive feelings that you're generating, you are going to pass on, and it will have a rippling effect all throughout. And there is, I think, no better incentive than to seek out healing, if you feel that you need it, than that. The thought that you are ensuring your own well-being and the well-being of everyone else. So Peter, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this on In the Light, Growing Your Soul today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Anna.
And once again, the book that we are talking about is called The Power of the Healing Field. And so I'm putting a link to that in the description box. And if people wanted to find out more about your work and wanted to get in touch with you, do you have a website? Yeah,
mindconnectionhealing.com. And especially if they read some of Kenzie's healing cases, if they want to drop her a line, give her an idea of the kind of situation they have, they'd like healing, she'll get back to them. She does the healing online. She does the training in energy psychology online. So that's the best, you know, the one-stop shop, so to speak. That's the best place to go.
A link for that will also be in the description box.
Thank you very much, Anna. Okay, thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Coming up in July, I am giving a talk on creativity and also doing a workshop. So do feel free to have a look at my website. It would be great to see you there. Next time, we're going to be talking about love and the power it holds to heal. Until then, goodbye.